Welcome to the Conscious Living Podcast, conversations to educate, empower, and enlighten our world. An uplifting and inspiring series of conversations and talks with your host, Jackie Woodside. We are educating minds, empowering lives, and enlightening souls to create a world where love prevails. In this engaging podcast, we deliver exciting, positive, transformative talks and teachings designed to elevate your life. Now, let's join our host, Jackie Woodside, for this week's session.
Hello there. I'm so glad you're here with me for another episode of the Conscious Living Podcast, where we are here to educate, empower, and enlighten our world. Don't you just love hearing that? I love that notion of being here to educate, empower, and enlighten. And doesn't our world need a bit of each of those today? Holy cow, the times that we're living in. Take a breath, folks. It's all going to be okay. We're here living consciously. I was just preparing a talk for Unity Church this weekend, and I'm drawing from Charles Fillmore's teaching on race consciousness. And he said that the consciousness of mankind is always changing and evolving, always moving for a higher good. But there are times that what did the word that he used? Retro something, go backwards. There are times that we go backwards in our conscious evolution. So wherever you are right now in your conscious evolution, I'm glad that this show is a part of it. I'm really excited today to work with a colleague who has probably one of the most interesting bios and backgrounds I've ever read before getting on the show. Renee Blodgett is from California. She's a novelist, curator, journalist, conscious business leader, photographer, humanitarian, and modern-day mystic. She has lived multiple lives in this one that she's been given. Having traveled around the world, she has so many stories to share about her experiences doing extraordinary things like riding elephants in an Indian jungle, or teaching English to girls in Kenya, photographing bears in northern Canada, teaching skiing and dance in Greece, mastering storytelling. She has the founder of an online platform and magazine called Blog the World. She's just an extraordinarily interesting person, and I am looking forward to talking with her today about her path toward conscious living. So, Renee Blodgett, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being my guest and making time to be here with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Jackie. I love your show, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So, that is quite an illustrative bio that you have. What an extraordinary life that you're living. And I think the thing that most caught my attention about it is, my thing is about living life consciously. And you clearly are doing that in all of the exploits that I just read about. But do you mind just, taking us on a little bit of that journey, telling us how you've been able to live multiple lifetimes in one, and just tell us a little bit more about your journey so that we can get to know you and perhaps learn some lessons of conscious living.
Well, it's interesting to pivot to where it started, because I actually started in healthcare and technology many, many years ago.
Okay.
And led a kind of exciting career doing that. I'd launched startups into the marketplace from all over the world, and, really had a fun career doing that, meeting very interesting people in the entertainment world, the tech world, the healthcare world, and so on, even, the musical world. But there was a point when I think the Internet of Things explosion was happening.
Okay.
And I started seeing everybody connected, or obsessed with, I should say, connected. The refrigerator that tells you your milk is due.
And we'll order it on Amazon for you, or Whole Foods, if you need that done. Yeah.
Yeah, if you need that done. And again, I'm not a Luddite. I mean, I was at the forefront of launching many of these things, and was in early AI, actually. I worked for Dragon Systems. I headed up their corporate communications in Massachusetts, not far from where you are. And, I loved it. I mean, speech recognition and AI was fascinating, and it had a very positive impact on many people's lives, particularly handicapped. And so, I'm not a Luddite. I'm very much about, in fact, we even have our own podcast about merging science and spirituality together. So I'm a huge believer in what tech can do for us. But what I was seeing is the imbalance happening at a really an escalated pace where I was seeing women, young women in the sauna in my gym who couldn't put their phones down. And at that point, I had not a meltdown. It wasn't a meltdown. It was a coming to Jesus moment.
Yeah, like you had an awakening.
Yeah, I just had, I can't do this anymore. And, before that, I had, been on the Wayne Dyer path and Tony Robbins and Deepak Chopra and, Ken Wilber and all of that. So I wasn't new to consciousness.
Yeah.
But it was this pivotal moment where which ones of my clients are conscious? Mm-hmm. And luckily I chose well. So most of them were, but I could just see, especially in Silicon Valley, right? I was in Massachusetts, part of that tech bubble too. And, there was just a difference in pace. Out here, it was like just quick, quick, quick. And there was no pause button. And so I completely unplugged, went to Iceland, spent time with puffin birds.
Oh, wow.
And really just kind of rewrote my chapter, really what is it gonna look like in the coming years ahead. And that really led me on a 10-year journey into study and teaching about consciousness.
Oh, wow. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I am, essentially that is what I consider myself to be, as a consciousness teacher. But people don't wake up in the morning thinking, I just wish I could raise my consciousness. So, so how you have to dress that up is often, in lots of different ways. How did you do all of that traveling to Gaza, to all of the South Africa and all the places that you've been?
That actually all happened way before my career really took off. I was a bohemian gypsy, really. Yeah, I just kind of set off with really very little cash. I won't lie to you. I didn't come from a wealthy family. I waited on tables, 3 different jobs, worked for the Dodgers, planning, meal plans or whatever, slept out of my car. I did what I needed to do to save a boatload of money to take off and travel around the world. And so that's what I did, with a backpack on my back and just set off. And so I had, because I didn't come from wealth, I had to work everywhere. And so all of those experiences that you cited is really what I did to survive. So working on a kibbutz, there's no revenue real exchange there, but you have a roof over your head. And picking green gages in New Zealand, same thing. You have a farm to stay on. And so all of those experiences were really random, to be honest with you. Most of them were random. I was a foreign exchange student in South Africa and then returned to lead a blogging tour many, many years later. So that was definitely planned. But most of them was, really this organic, what's next? Oh, I just met someone who said, hey, have you ever been to Egypt? Well, no, I hadn't. Well, let's go explore the pyramids. And so it was really an unfolding of an organic lifestyle that just was centered in the present moment.
What a gift that is, for sure. And to do that as such a young person, that's really a gift. And now you're a consciousness teacher. You wrote a book called Magdalene's Journey.
Magdalene's Journey, yes.
Yeah.
There she is.
Well, tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, it's interesting because I knew I was going to write books. I was one of the earliest bloggers ever. So I've always been writing and probably authored 50,000 articles on the web at this point. Something like that at last check.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. But in the early days, they were snippets, right? Back in the days of Dig and Reddit, they were short, just to get kind of traction. But, in the last 15 years, they've been really long form feature articles.
Wow.
So I knew I was going to write books, but about a religious biblical character when I ran from religion at a very young age, not in a million years could have I ever seen myself do that. And then I met Anthony, my partner, who after 2 years into the relationship started channeling. And, it's not as if I didn't know what channeling was, but I certainly didn't seek it out. And so some of these messages that came through kind of led us down, I'll call it the quantum rabbit hole, to really never land of trying to figure out what these messages meant. And it took a lot of study and research. And the book was actually the result of that, which we turned into a visionary literary tale and a historical fiction tale of a woman who was written out of history books, 2,000 years ago. And so it really got me to thinking, because I'm not super young, I mean, but I'm at that bridge where I had rights over my body and my grandmother didn't. So I just kind of missed that cusp of, I could vote, right? And so it wasn't really that long ago that women, even in this country, really had no rights. It was really only 2 generations. And so I think even for the millennials who are listening and, the Gen Y and the Gen Z, it's like this, it's passed on, right? It's passed on through epigenetics. It's in our system, but we don't know what we don't know. And I think that the research on this book led me to this moment of like, wow, how many other pivotal women were written out of history and so-called holy books? It's really history through this woman's eyes, which is a far cry from what the patriarch has led us to believe about not just her, but about women's roles during that time.
And how, having written a book that powerful about the feminine, about feminine energies, about how women being written out of history, and then looking at the times that we're in, where there is some question on maybe a more far right faction, but that women should no longer be able to vote, that it should be a household vote, that women shouldn't be voting. The constitutional right to an abortion has been revoked. How do you make sense of the current times, given the knowledge that you have about historical female figures?
It's a really great question. People ask us variations of that quite a bit in our courses and our memberships. And there's a famous saying, and I can't even remember who. It was actually another consciousness speaker who referenced it. It's not his quote, but it's a famous saying. It's that it's always darkest before the dawn, right? And I think that there is a holding on right now. It's like there's so much consciousness that is erupting around the planet. There's circles happening. There's goddess gatherings. There's just a whole different movement happening that's unprecedented, at least in our lifetime, right? And for many, many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, I would argue. And so it's scary. It's scary to the patriarch to see what's happening. And there really should be no fear, right? The whole abundance mindset is that there's enough for all of us, regardless of our orientation. But when power has been held by the few, and the few meaning, the white male.
White straight males.
Yeah, thank you. White straight males. And so it's threatening. And so they're hanging on, and it's coming out in very distorted, ugly ways that are like, can this actually be happening? I have friends who are older than me who have marched and marched and marched for women's rights, and they're in disbelief. How can this be happening? So I guess I would say from a bigger picture perspective is that have faith, have trust that there's a process in place and that it is always dark before the dawn. And I don't think that you can stop the consciousness that's happening around the planet right now. And so it only takes a few percent to kind of move that needle. So even though it feels like we're kind of going down, there's other things that are happening, like awareness, right? Awareness about what it means to have a democracy and to live in a democracy. Consciousness about what we eat and what we put into our bodies, consciousness about vaccines, consciousness about everything, And so I think that, this is a kind of a reckoning. I know that sounds religious. I don't mean it in that way, but it's a reckoning time, isn't it? Because
social reckoning, perhaps.
Well, it's asking all of us to wake up, right? And to take back our own agency and to really be responsible for our own decisions, how our children are schooled, and how we receive healthcare, and understanding our bodies enough to push back and say, you know what, maybe I don't want to feed my family with a bunch of pharma. Maybe I can, implement science when it's life threatening or when I really need that. But for the rest of the time, really do integrative medicine and marry the two. And I think, one of the things that I see a lot of the time is that people on the integrative side really just shut out science and traditional medicine, and vice versa. And, our belief and our teachings really center around bringing the two together, and being smart and having common sense about it.
Yeah, no, I love that. You're bringing up so many good points. I told you before we started recording that I need to leave like immediately afterwards, and the reason is because I'm going to an integrative medicine appointment, a soft wave therapy for soft tissue injury that I've had for quite a while, and so I went. I saw the traditional medicine person, and I chose the alternative route. And it's expensive. I have the luxury of being able to make that choice. Most people don't. Right. So, I mean, I grapple with this, Renee, in terms of my privilege, my economic status, my educational status, my racial status. I have a lot of privilege, and it's almost like there's getting, the middle class is disappearing, but not even just the economic middle class, but I also feel in terms of health and wellness and well-being. You talked about like the circles of consciousness and feminine energy, and you use some phrase about what women are gathering. Some women are gathering. Like I don't see that. I was thinking, wow, she's definitely in California. Here in more conservative New England, I don't see as much of that as I'm sure you do out there. But I mean, I'm sure you grapple with this just like I do. How do you make sense of the fact that people like you and I might have this access to integrative medicine and even the education or the ability to research and find, the knowledge about integrative medicine when, I don't know, 70, 80, 90% of our culture doesn't? How do you make sense of that?
Well, I do think, I don't have all the answers, or
of course.
or I'd be running for office. But
there you go.
But I do believe, and one of the things that I see where we can empower ourselves from the ground up, because, in business, we talk about ground down, right? And then ground up management, different sort of styles. And, the ground up has always been about community.
Yeah.
And I think right now, the even bigger challenge, because if we have community, we can, how do I put this? We can supplement those who are struggling in a different way, because we have firsthand experience. So you see this with the ICE raids, right? Where suddenly, you have this very conservative, right? And I don't want to get into politics here, but just the idea of, oh, my house cleaner just got taken, or my gardener just got taken.
A bunch of my handymen got taken. Like four different guys who do work at my house got taken.
Yeah, and that's a very real thing, because they become friends. They become people that you care about. And so I think that's where it needs to happen, where we get, I don't want to use the word angry, we get empowered enough because of the frustration that this is happening before our eyes, and it feels like our democracy is falling apart. And by the way, not just here, but in the world. We're just came back from France, and led a Magdalene retreat over there related to the book, actually. And we were meeting a lot of people who were conscious, wondering what's going on, and saying things like France is falling apart too, and look at what's happening in Italy. And so there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, because when we have models at the top that are toxic, regardless, we're not the only country that has that, then it's really up to us to empower ourselves one soul at a time. And though, it seems small, right? Like, what can I do by empowering one soul at a time? You have no idea. Right?
Well, it's exponential because we're not talking about the person, we're talking about the energy.
That's right.
When you're talking about the soul level, it is exponential because it's not just, helping this person eat better or helping this person be less depressed. But when you change the consciousness of an individual, whether it's around health or well-being or self-regulation, dealing with your inner world of thought, however you're helping someone change consciousness, their vibratory pattern changes.
Totally.
Yeah. And anytime one person's vibratory pattern changes, the vibratory pattern of humanity changes. There's only
the collective.
Yeah, there's only one consciousness. Charles Fillmore, he called it race consciousness. Teilhard de Chardin called it noosphere. The noosphere.
Yes, I know. I love his work, actually.
Yeah. The thinking layer of the earth. And I did really appreciate how much Charles Fillmore was talking about the evolution of humanity is not linear. There are times of progress and there's times of regress. I also liked what you said about community, that kind of the answer, if you will, is how we take care of each other in community. I have a bunch of Amish friends in upstate New York. I have a summer home in upstate New York, very, very rural, right on the Canadian border, super, super rural area. And it's largely an Amish community that we happen to live in as well. And I'm having 3 Amish guys build a house for me right now. So one of the things I had to ask them was like, what happens if one of you gets hurt? I'm assuming you don't have insurance. They don't participate in our system of culture. And they said, no, we don't. I said, well, okay, so what if one of you gets hurt on the job site? What happens? He said, oh yeah, we take care of that. Whoever is in that person's sub-community, that Amish sub-community, they all come together for a meeting and they decide how much each family needs to pay to take care of that person while they convalesce. I was like, wow. And he didn't
be the message for every single leader. Jeff Bezos could write a check tomorrow and take care of the entire homeless situation in the United States of America.
Exactly right.
Done, right? But that's not where they're spending their money or their
it's not where their consciousness is.
It's not where their consciousness is. But this gives us an opportunity like the feminine rising, because our values, I'm sure you've heard this book. I read it years ago, The Heroine's Journey, right?
Oh, sure. Yep.
It was the counter to Joseph Campbell's
work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm rereading it for the first time in 1,000 years. And one of the things that I loved was just how this analogy of the parallel to everything in the masculine is about forward movement, forward progress, all of that. But for women, it's spiral.
Oh.
And, it's interesting because like everything that we do in our programs is spiral. It's not linear, right? It's, and I don't want to go into the quantum stuff because quantum scientists have such a hard time with any spiritual, groups of people who talk about quantum consciousness in that way. So I won't go there, but, because I'm not a quantum physicist, but, I've read a lot of books on quantum theory, and it's just fascinating to me, this whole idea of the observer effect. And then if you map that back to ancient, timeless wisdom from the East, from the Kabbalah, really across traditions, it's the same. It's very similar. This idea of when we're observing behavior, things shift. That's how remote healing happens. That's how a lot of these things that we can't explain, miracle cures and all of these things happen, right? Even if we can't understand it with our linear constructs at this time. So that shift is happening, and I feel it's the divine feminine rising to kind of take that leadership now.
Say more about that, Renee. I want to hear your thoughts about the divine feminine rising and how that has a role in leadership in where our current times. I'd love to hear your thinking on that.
Well, I believe that women think differently about everything. Everything.
I mean, differently than men, you mean?
Yeah, not to say that there haven't been toxic female leaders who run things into the ground and, don't care about, the community around them and the populations that they serve. But I do believe that there's a sense of cooperation and collaboration, that it doesn't have to be, me, myself, and I. But, part of the problem, even though we've been programmed that way, and that's really, we're about hearth and home and taking care of family and taking care of each other. And, you know, that's been really kind of stripped away. It's given a negative connotation, right? Because, I don't want to be like my mother. She was a housewife. Through that, I'm going to be like dad. So I think, and so many layers. I mean, we could do a whole 2-hour podcast on this topic alone. I have so much to say about it. But, the summarized version would really be that we need to heal the wounds with each other, between sister, mother, daughter, female friend, because certainly in my lifetime growing up in, male management, predominantly male management, where I was almost, not always, but almost always the only woman in the boardroom.
Yeah.
And so when you have these models of behavior and then you're going to go run for office, guess what models you're bringing with you, right? All the male, masculine dominated features. Now, I think there's lots of beauty and amazingness in masculinity, and we need that, right? They exist. Masculine and feminine exists in all of us, regardless of our sexual orientation. So it's not about a negative hate game against the masculine. It's about flowing and using the right energies at the right time to support something bigger than yourself. So that's really, to say that women don't have ego is to say, it's ridiculous, right? Of course, we all have egos, but it's really these divine feminine and masculine principles, right? And that we need to ebb and flow with them. And so to realize and to honor and for us to elevate collectively as a feminine consciousness, the feminine values of collaboration, of connection, of love.
Right.
Marianne Williamson, lover or hater, she was on our podcast. And we were right before she was running for office. And I asked her, I said, love isn't cool in business and love isn't cool in politics. And she's like, love is cool.
That's great. That's great.
It's just, but how do we do it in a way really that is, supported and embraced and not thrown into this weak feminine siloed box that we've been putting it for millennia and beyond. And so that really needs a new call for feminine leadership who dares to pave that path, and other women and men to support that all of these things matter.
And Marianne has been doing that. I mean, she is bringing these concepts. I mean, she's getting, slaughtered in mainstream media because of it. Kudos to her for having the courage and the strength, and the fortitude and the commitment to do it. But she is someone who is bringing forth some of that feminine energy. And honestly, I'm trying to grapple in my head right now for even one other person, maybe Pete Buttigieg a little bit. I think he can bring forth some of that. I thought Cory Booker was going to, and then I got super disappointed in him. But one of the things I wanted to go back to as you're talking about the rise of the divine feminine is you said that women need to heal their relationships with women, sisters with sisters, daughters with mothers, friend to friend. Tell me about that. Why is that so important at the time that we're in right now?
Well, I think as we've been conditioned, at least in my generation and behind me, and probably the generation after me too, I think there's healing that's happening after that, because they're not, once we heal the stuff that we have going on with ourselves, it's almost like it's a generational, Thomas Hubel talks about this. And so does our mutual friend Dawson Church with epigenetics, but, it's a healing backwards and forwards, right? And so I think that's necessary for us to both realize it's happening and then to take the moment to sit and say, I see you. And not just see you, but support each other. There's, I think there's a TED Talk. I can't remember where I heard it, but I just loved it. And it's this idea, we talked about privilege earlier, and I didn't grow up with a lot of money, but through my hard work, I made it to, wow, I was going to the TED conference every year and I was paying for it. Like, who gets to do that, right? So I moved into this privileged class. And a lot of times I was kind of on the outside. And I remember asking Richard Saul Wurman, the founder of TED, because I was trying to get some really pivotal, strong women for my book on people. It was a photo book. I still haven't finished it. It's like this project I'm dying to get back to. Anyway, who's making a dent with love and consciousness in business? And so I wanted to get some women for this book. And I was standing there at this D conference. It's all things digital. There was more wealth on that networking patio than I don't know how many countries combined. I mean, Jeff Bezos was there at the time. I can't remember the founders of Twitter. It's a tiny little, thing down in Palm Springs. And I'm standing there with Richard. And he said, well, I asked women and a lot of women turned me down. And I was going to walk over to the bar and ask, help me out, former CEO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg.
Yeah, Sheryl Sandberg, yeah.
Sheryl Sandberg was standing there, and I asked her, and she turned me down. And Richard was watching the whole exchange, and I went back to him, and he said, you get my point. And it was so discouraging, it was just so discouraging. And I thought, I'm not going to let that kind of get in my way. But it really made me start to peel back the onions and figure out why this is, why. And I do think that we've been raised in a society of deprivation. And so if you're a woman trying to get to the top, and you're the only woman and somebody else is coming after you, you're going to squash their joy and squash their chances of success because you want to make it. You've worked your ass off. Thanks very much. And I don't have space for you. I think I know that's a little harsh. It's a harsh way of saying it, but that's been my experience. And
where we are, it's where we are with our current and evolving consciousness and the evolution of humanity. It is still, I would say, not acceptable. It's subjugated to bring in the feminine qualities to politics and to the workplace and to business and to finance. And I totally get that you would get a lot of no's. And I hope you'll stick with the project because it sounds like it's much needed in the times that we're living in to really bring forth a wise, connected voice that can honor the divine feminine in real world.
But the way to heal that, Jackie, is to sit with the sister, or when you go to a networking thing, like I'm going to go to one tomorrow in the city, who's your plus one? I think that was the TED Talk. That was the reason I went down that path and didn't finish it. Who's your plus one? Because who you choose to bring with you might be a sister who doesn't have opportunity to go to a networking thing like that. So bring her along and expose her to a higher profile, because men did that for me. Women didn't do that. It was venture capitalist friends who brought me into these networking circles. So be the woman who brings another woman as plus one. Someone who doesn't have a chance to network with people like that and have a chance, because this, right? Access is power. And so you get in the right room. It's not about who's smart enough. God, just look around the world and see our leaders. It's not about that. It's about network. So that is
you and I met through the Girls Network.
We did.
We met through the Girls.
It's changing. See, it's changing.
It is changing, 100%. Well, Renee, listen, I could talk to you all day, but I've got to go to my therapy appointment and get off and get my soft tissue done. I'd love to have you back on the show. This was, there's so many tributaries of conversation off of this one. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on what consciousness is and how we actually consciously elevate consciousness. It's another topic you and I.
Oh, that would be great. That would be a great one.
Great topic. Anyway, there's so much more that you and I can do together. So let's be sure that we do this again very soon. In the meantime, Renee, I'm sure people are going to want to look you up. Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you?
A few websites. So one is bluesoulmedia.com, which is where I help women speak their truth and elevate their voice. And then Blue Soul Earth is the business I do with my partner, where we lead sacred retreats around the world, consciousness retreats, and teach. And we have a program launching in January that's all about elevating our consciousness, actually. It's a 12-month program, and that's at bluesoulearth.com. And then Study with Spirit is just guided meditations, pre-recorded courses, and then we are also on YouTube as well, Blue Soul Earth.
All right. Well, we'll put all of that in the show notes. And I so appreciate your time and generosity being here with us on the Conscious Living podcast. It's really, really lovely to meet you and spend some time together. So thanks so much for being here.
Well, same here, Jackie. Thanks so much for having me.